Hello, this lesson is about the question, how low is low? This is in relation to the four steps of hypothesis testing. Let's go back to our four steps here. So here's the basic four steps. Step one, write your hypothesis or hypotheses. That's the null and alternate hypotheses. Step two, collect and summarize the data. Get your sample mean, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, step three, get your analysis. You figure out how many standard deviations is your sample mean from the null hypothesis. Get your p-value, et cetera, et cetera. You're asking if the null is true. What's probably getting what we got. And then step four, and this is what I want to talk about here, is your conclusion. If the p-value is low, you reject the null hypothesis. All right, so how low is low enough? Um, I'll give you a quick answer, and then I'll give you a little bit more detail about it. So basically, there has to be some cutoff point. So some cutoff number to make you decide to reject that null hypothesis for rejecting uh, the null hypothesis. And this number is called alpha. It's a Greek letter, lowercase Greek letter alpha. In general, it's the most commonly used number is 0.05. Um, and so then, in other words, if you decide to set your cutoff number to be 0.05, then you would say for step four, your conclusion stage, you say if your p-value is less than 0.05, then you reject that null hypothesis. Um, all right, so if you have no idea, you just want to get a number, then just use 0.05. Now, there are occasions where you want to have a higher number or lower number, and I guess the question comes down to how badly do you want to reject the null hypothesis? So if you lower your alpha, say to like 0.01, that means that you're really requiring a really low p-value. It means you're really requiring really strong proof, uh, requiring very strong proof uh, before you reject that null hypothesis. Before you reject it. So if you get if you get like p-value is 0.02, you'd say, oh, not low enough. Uh, p-value has to be really, really low. Now, sometimes you want to raise that alpha. You might want to go up to like, 0.10 or even 0.15 or something like that. That makes it easy to reject that null hypothesis. So this is if you only require weak evidence. If you take a sample and it's somewhat close to the null hypothesis, but it's far enough away that your p-value is like 0.13 or something. Yes, you could say there's weak evidence for rejecting the null, and if you require only weak evidence to reject the null, then you raise your alpha. Now, there's pros and cons here. If you make your alpha super low like this, then it gets really hard to reject that null. But the flip side is if you do reject the null, you're really sure that's the correct decision. But on the other hand, the opposite problem is that you could end up, if the burden of proof is so high here that you need, or I guess so low in this case because its p-value has to be low, then if p-value is really low, then there'll be a lot of cases where the alternate is actually true, but you end up not rejecting the null because your alpha was so tough to get alpha that low. And then the exact same, but in reverse for having a high alpha. If you have a really high alpha, you'll reject the null quite a lot, but sometimes the null will actually be false. Uh, um, so or excuse me, let me restate that. If your alpha is high, then you'll reject that null quite a lot, even when sometimes that null is actually true. That's what I meant to say. All right, so there's some pros and cons, but for homework and so forth, just let alpha be 0.05. Or in some problems, they will just tell you. And a key word here is the phrase level of significance. So sometimes in the homework, they'll say let alpha equal 0.05. Sometimes they'll say level of significance. And so the question will say something like, blah, 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 blah. Is there evidence of blah, 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 comma, at the, let's say, 5% level of significance? So that's just telling you, let your alpha be equal to 0.5. That's all that phrase, level of significance, is talking about. And that is it for your alpha.